Five Visits to the Word-hoard, 2005. The title of my talk is in tribute to Robert Breinhardt's amazing book of his translations of the Haida poets Nine Visits to the Myth World, and also in tribute to the Anglo-Saxon poets far back in our literary tradition. The word hoard was what they call in their well of inspiration, which overlapped with the language itself, and the hoard signified treasure. A treasure is kept in a secret, guarded place, and words were seen as a mysterious treasure. They were to be valued, and so I hold them to be. More simply, I'm talking about acts of writing, my own acts of writing, which are the only kind I can speak about, and how I've approached them over the years. This is an area I usually duck on chat shows. When people say, "How do you write?" I say, "With a pencil," or something equally terse. When they say, "Why do you write?" I say, "Why does the sun shine?" Or if I'm feeling crabby, I say, "People never ask dentists why they fool around inside other people's mouths." Let me explain why I'm so evasive. No, let me not explain why. Instead, I'll tell you a true story. As a creative writing teacher is always saying, show, don't state. Here's the story. I have a friend who is a musician. He began in magic as a teenager and did magic shows on stage, and from there went to radio and then into television and made a lot of money. But at heart, he remains a magician, and he has invented many tricks and has contributed greatly to the literature of magic. Every year, there's a magician's congress in Toronto that revolves around him. Magicians come from far and near, and after the public play part of the Congress, there's a party for the magicians. Sometimes non magicians are there too. In this party, you can hear magicians talking to one another. Among the magicians, things are the same as they are among bird watchers, or among the poets, or among the jazz musicians, or among the writers, the Writers' Festival, or among the members of any group of people who value an art, a craft, or a skill, that is to say, the usual social hierarchy based on wealth or ancestry or company position or such, all of that dissolves and the individuals are valued by their peers according to their levels of accomplishments. What are the magicians saying to one another? Their talking shop. Sometimes they're split into pairs and trade secrets, one on one. The secrets they trade are trade secrets. They exchange tricks. You've seen one of those TV programs in which magicians tell how it is done. Those are immoral, as far as I'm concerned, because people go to the magic shows to be dazzled and fooled and amazed, just as they read novels to enter into another world and to be convinced that everything in that novel is real, at least within the covers of the book. People don't want to know how it is done about magic because that spoils the illusion. There's sometimes a smart kid in the audience who says, "I know how you did that." And maybe when we think about it, we do know. Though not often, in my case. But here's the point. Even if we know or think we know, we can't do it ourselves. There's knowing what and there's knowing how. And the how comes from years of practice and failure and dropping the egg that was supposed to come out of the hat and crumpling up chapter 1 for the 20th time and throwing it into the waste paper basket. Robert Louis Stevenson burned 3 finished novels before he magically produced Treasure Island. Those incinerated novels were the 3 eggs he dropped. But the 3 broken eggs did not go to waste, for by dropping them he learned how to make the next egg appear out of what seemed like thin air. Sometimes that never happens, of course. There's nothing inevitable about it. You can work away for years, but alas, and to return to the metaphor of the magician, either you've got hands or you don't. But if you don't have the hands, you'll never rise above the level of merely competent. Sometimes it's just one uncooked omelette after another. But also, you may have the hands, the talent, but not the motivation. In that case, you'll abandon your art quite soon because you won't be prepared to put in the work of the craft. I was once given a wonderful breakfast at the small Irish inn. When complimented, the man who ran the place said he had worked as a chef at a restaurant that had now gone downhill. By coincidence, we'd eaten supper there the night before. I said the meal had been very good. Ah, yes, he said. Anyone can cook a good meal. Once. We've all encountered those first novels that shine with the freshness of dew, and the second novels that wilt, and even the third novels that cause their authors to rise from the grave. Then there's the fourth novel, and the fifth, and the sixth. There are the ones that separate the sprinters from the marathoners. But art is cruel, and there's nothing necessarily more virtuous about a wondrous sixth novel, more virtuous than it is, than the wondrous first novel. It may demonstrate character and perseverance in the practitioner, his or her ability to look in the mirror and say, why am I doing this? And to keep on writing anyway, but that's all it demonstrates. As with magic, an unforgettable performance is an unforgettable performance, whether or not it's ever followed by another. Dylan Thomas has a poem that begins, in my craft or sullen art, he names both art and craft. Art, which requires some talent to begin with, which is why I will never be and could never be an opera singer, and craft, which requires a talent to be owned and polished by focused discipline, which is why some people with marvelous voices will never become opera singers either. Here is Robertson Davies in his novel Fifth Business. The character is a young boy who's enamored of magic, the conjuring kind, and longs to be able to do it, but he's clumsy. Whereas Paul, the much smaller boy, watching him practice his tricks, is not. I cannot guess now how many weeks I worked on the sleight of the hand pass called The Spider. Just try to do it. Try it with red, knuckly Scott's hands, stiffened by grass cutting and snow shoveling, and see what skill you develop. Of course, Paul wanted to know what I was doing, and being a teacher at heart, I told him. Like this? He asked, and taking the coin from me, performing the pass perfectly. I was stunned and humiliated, but looking back on it now, I think I behaved pretty well. Yes, like that, I said. He could do anything with his hands. There was no sense in envying him. He had the hands, and I had not. And although there were times when I considered killing him just to rid of the world of the precocious nuisance, I could not overlook that fact. It's much the same for any art. You need the hands. But you need more than the hands too. Here is Alice Munro in the short story called Curtis Island. It seemed that I had to be the writer as well as a reader. I bought a school notebook and I tried to did write, pages that started off authoritatively and then went dry, so that I had to tear them out, twist them up in hard punishment, and put them in the garbage can. I did this over and over again until I had the only notebook cover left. Then I bought another notebook and started the whole process once more. The same cycle, excitement and despair, excitement and despair. It was like having a secret pregnancy and miscarriage every week. Not entirely secret either. Just knew that I read a lot and I was trying to write. He didn't discourage it at all. He thought it was something reasonable and that I might quite possibly learn to do. It would take hard practice, but could be mastered, like bridge or tennis. This generous faith I did not thank him for. I just added to the farce of my disasters. The narrator and her husband Chas are both right. You can work at a thing and you can learn it, but only up to a point. Beyond that comes the talent, which is given. It's there, or it isn't there, in varying quantities. And it can't be predicted or demanded, and it is not reasonable and predictable. And it can be with you at one point of your life and then vanish. Practicing a craft can awaken a dormant talent. Conversely, too much practicing can kill it. Such matters are incalculable, and much depends on coincidence and luck. Much also depends on teachers. For all writers have teachers. Sometimes they're living people, writers or not, and sometimes more often they're dead writers or writers known to be aspiring young person only through their books. Often, when they think back over their lives, writers can remember the exact book they were reading, the exact moment when their talent was first called into life. Quite often, this happens in youth, but not always, because every life is different, every book is different, and every future is unpredictable. So, what can I tell you that will be of any use to you if you want to write or are already doing so? Read a lot, write a lot, watch and listen and work and wait. Apart from that, I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you a little about what I myself have done. So now I'm going to describe to you 5 of my visits to the word hoard. I won't tell you too much about the dropped eggs. You'll have to trust me on this. Sometimes there was an egg from wall to wall. My first novel to be published was not the first to be written. That one was never seen the light of the day, which is just as well. It was quite a dark book, not to say a lugubrious one, and it ended with the heroine wondering whether or not to push the male protagonist off the roof. I was 23 when I wrote it and living in a rooming house. The room cost about $7 a month, and cooking my dinners on a one ring hot plate. They had plastic packages that you could boil then, and that is what I did. The rest of the food I kept in the bureau drawer. The bathroom was shared with the others, and it was there also that you had to wash the dishes, which gave rise to the odd frozen pea or noodle in the bathtub. I had a day job. That was how I paid for the room in the rooming house. I had a typewriter at the day job, and I could do the job itself in the half time. I was at work, so after I finished what was required of me, I would just roll my novel into the typewriter and type away at it. This gave me a pleasingly industrious look. When I had finished this novel and I sent it out to publishers, such as they were in Canada in those times, several of them expressed interest. One publisher indeed took me out for a drink at the top of the Hotel Vancouver. He suggested that maybe I might change the ending to something a bit more cheerful. I said no. I didn't think I could do that. He leaned across the table and patted my hand. Is there something we can do? He said, as if I had some kind of lingering disease. That was visit 1. Here comes visit 2. My day job, while I was writing the first unsuccessful novel, was with a market research company of considerable eccentricity, and it was this material. Material, just as in sewing, is anything you use to make the thing you're making. It was this market research office material that got into the next novel. By this time, I had a different job. I was in British Columbia, filling a university teaching job on the lowest rung of the ladder. I taught a survey course from Chaucer to T.S. Eliot in tiny bite-sized chunks, and I also taught grammar to engineering students at 8:30 in the morning in the Quonset hut left over the Second World War. The baby boom was hitting the universities then. It was 1964 to 1965, and there was a shortage of space. I made the engineers do writing exercises based on Kafka's short parables, which was good for them, I felt, since I was sure it would be of use in their future careers. Meanwhile, I continued with my secret life, which was the life of a writer. Like vampires, I had to pursue this life at night. I had a real sink of my own now in which to put the dishes. Like many other people, I would use every dish until they were all dirty, and the first ones to be put in the sink were sprouting mold. Vancouver is a damp place. Then I would wash them at all once, in a burst of energy and desperation. There's not much of a craft dinner where the hot dogs got up into it that I don't know. The rest of the time I ate at Smitty's pancake houses, especially on mornings when I didn't have to be in the Quonset hut with engineers. Sometimes, in a spurt of reckless hedonism, I went skiing. I began my second novel in the spring of 1965. I wrote each chapter in handwriting in empty exam booklets left over from my teaching duties. These booklets were a convenient size, a sort of chapter size. I sat at the card table to do this writing beside a window that looked over the harbor and the mountains. It isn't always a good thing for the writer to have a lovely view. It can be distracting. If the writing came to a halt or I couldn't get started, I might go to the movies. Luckily, I had no television set. Indeed, I had hardly any furniture at all. I didn't see the point of it in those days. Furniture was a thing parents had, and anyway, I couldn't afford it. I wrote on the right hand pages, and on the left hand pages, I drew little pictures when I wanted to visualize more completely what one of the characters were wearing. Or I would make notes there. Then I would type the handwritten pages and act complicated by the fact that I couldn't really type. I used a typist for the final versions of the novels until the personal computer became available. The last book I wrote in the old way was The Handmaid's Tale in 1985. Using these imperfect methods, I cranked out my first novel in roughly 6 months. A helpful hint: it's easier to go without sleep when you're younger. Then I sent off to the typist version of the publisher that had shown interest in the earlier one. We didn't have agents in Canada then. Now you'd have to go through an agent, no doubt, and there are many great people writing, and the publishers use the agents as a kind of a sieve. The publisher accepted the book, and somewhat to my surprise. But then I didn't hear anything about it for quite a few months. By then, I was back at Harvard studying for my PhD overalls. I knew I would have to support my writing somehow, financially, and university teachers were in short supply then. I thought it would be better than waitressing, which I'd already tried, and also better than another few things that I might have been able to do. Note that I'd been turned down by the Bell Telephone Company and also by both publishers who subsequently became mine. All were quite right to reject me. I wasn't cut out for the jobs they were offering. Once I'd passed my orals, I went in search of my vanished novel. Turned out the publishers had misplaced it, and they had found it again, and I did a revision in yet another location, Montreal. In 1967, 1968, while teaching both day and evening classes in Victorian and American romantic literature there. It was published in the fall of 1969, just in time for some, though not for others, to hail it as a product of newly forged women's movement. It wasn't, of course. Its composition predated the en masse advent of the movement by 4 years. But it did sort of fit in since it ends with, but then you should never tell the ending. By the time I'd moved out again to a place where the women's movement had not ever been heard of, Edmond, Alberta, it was there that I did my first ever book signing in the men's sock and underwear department of Hudson's Bay Company. I sat at a table near the escalator with my little pile of books with a sign proclaiming the title, The Edible Woman. This title frightened a lot of men, ranchers and oil tycoons, I like to think they were, who had wandered in at noon hour to buy their jockey short. They fled in droves. I sold 2 copies. This was not my vision of the writing life. Proust never had to flog his books at the women's lingerie apartment, I reflected. I did wonder whether or not I had taken the wrong turn in my career path. Perhaps it was not too late to go into insurance or real estate or almost anything other than writing. But then, as Samuel Beckett said when he was asked why he became a writer, not good for anything else. The third novel writing experience I'll describe is somewhat more complex. We are now in the year 1994, and I've become a grown up, at least to outward appearances. In spring, while on a book tour in Europe in Zurich, city of Jung, and while staying in a hotel with a view out over the waters, always so conducive to controlled hallucinations, I have found, I began writing the first chapter of a book. I hadn't intended to start a book right then, but the choice of starting time never seems to be under writer's control. Another helpful hint: if you keep waiting for the perfect circumstances before you begin, you'll probably never begin. As often before, I had been trying to write another, quite different book just before this. But I found myself in the book that was eventually to become the 1996 novel Alias Grace. By this time, I had evolved the following working method. I would write by hand for 10 or 15 pages. Then I would spend half the day typing up those pages while continuing to advance in handwriting at what you could think of as the front lines of the book. It was a sort of rolling barrage technique. That way I could keep in mind where I had just been while covering more new ground at the same time. When I was about 100 pages into the book, our family was spending some time writing in France. In the fall, I realized that I had started it wrong. This happened on the train to Paris, where I was going to do some promotion for an earlier book. I was keeping a journal at the time, and here's what I wrote. I had a sort of electric storm in my brain. It came to me on the train that the novel was not working, but after 2 days of, here there is a drawing of cloud and lightning, I think I have the solution. It means throwing out some characters and stuff and rearranging, but it's the only way, I think. The problem is, and always has been, what is the connection between A and B? Looking at these notes now, I can't remember exactly what A and B were. I think I was trying one of those in the present, in the past structures, and throughout the present timeline, and got right into the past, which was a lot more interesting and peculiar since Alias Grace is based on a real life double murder that took place in 1843. How I came to know about this murder is another story. I also changed the person in which the book was written from the third to the first, and here is an helpful hint. If you're blogged, try changing the tense or the person. Frequently, this will work. Also, if you have a really bad headache, go to sleep. Often, you will have the answer in the morning. By April 4, the 1995, I had 177 pages of Alias Grace. By September 1995, I had 395 pages. You can see I was chugging along, rewriting as I went. I submitted the book to the publishers in January 1996, at which point I went to Ireland and became ill. This often happens when you finish an intense stretch of work of any kind. The body has wanted a rest for some time and you haven't given it one, so it waits patiently until there's some breathing space and then it takes revenge. Back to methods. As a rule, I start out writing slowly, feeling my way into the cave, if you like. Then I gather speed and increase hours until by the end I'm writing for 8 hours a day and I can barely walk without bending over and I can no longer see straight. I don't recommend any of this. I think everyone should instead take up the champion swimming or speed skating or ballroom dancing. It is much better for your health than writing is. The last thing I ever wanted to be was a role model, so I don't take anything I've said about my own methods as an example to be followed. The fourth book that I'll talk about is The Blind Assassin, which was published in the year on 2000. I set out with sort of a vision, induced probably by the family photograph albums. I was intending to write about the grandmother and my mother, both of their generations, which together would span the 20th century. But my actual grandmother and mother were far too nice to be put in a book by me. So I started writing about a more problematic old lady who was dead and who had had a secret second life that was being discovered by a still living character through some letters found in the hat box. That didn't work. so I threw out the hat box and the letters, but I kept the secret life. Next, I was writing about the same old lady, but now she was still alive. She was being discovered by two other characters, nosy people they were, and these were a container in the book too. It was a suitcase, and inside it was a photograph album. But this didn't work either. The two other characters started having an affair, and the man who was married and just had twins, so you can see that the affair was going to take over the book. And the eclipse, the old lady who was the one I really wanted to write about. So into a drawer went the adulterous pair, and away went the suitcase, though I kept one of the photos. At last, the old lady began to speak for herself, and then the book could go forward. This third version had the container in it as well. It was a steamed trunk. Inside it were all the things you find inside to this very day in the chapter called The Steamer Trunk. I'm aware that the way I told the story makes it sound more like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but there is something to do. You have to keep trying one chair after another until you find just the right chair, the one that fits, and hope that not too many bears will come out of the woods while you're doing it. The fifth visit to the word-hoard took place in the summer of 2005, resulting in a book and this part of Myth series, which has a dozen writers and 34 publishers around the world involved in it. The idea was to take a myth, any myth, and retell in a peppy, relevant book of 100 pages or so. This is a darn sight harder to do than you think, as I soon found out. I did give it a try. I tried it in this way and that with no results. I couldn't seem to get the kite to fly. As every writer knows, a plot is only a plot. A plot as such is two-dimensional unless it can be made to come to life, and it can only come to life through characters in it. And in order to make the characters live, there must be some blood in the mix. I won't sadden myself by detailing my failed attempts. Let's just say that there were so many of them that I was on the point of giving the things up altogether. Desperation being the mother of invention, I eventually started writing the Penelope Pad. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. Let's just say that hanging of the 12 maids, slaves, really, at the end of the Odyssey seemed to me unfair in the first reading, and seems so still. They were all hanged from the same row. How frugal. As the Odyssey says, their feet twitched a little, but not for long. So, although Penelope herself, the wife of Odysseus, the main narrator of the Penelopiad, the second narrator is the maid, they keep interrupting. Like the chorus of the Greek tragedy, they comment on the main action and act as a counterpoint to it. Sometimes they do this in popular song. I'm afraid I've called them the chorus line. Now I've said enough about the way I write, or about the way I've written so far. It can all change. It can all stop. The blank page is always pure potential for everyone, me included. Every time you begin, it's just as frightening and just as much of a risk. I'll close by telling you another true story. I was in the cafe the other day getting some takeout coffee. Quite a few people now recognize me, especially since I let myself be talked into impersonating a goalie in the comedian Rick Mercer's show, and a man working in the cafe did too. He was from the Philippines. He told me, "You're the author," he said. "Is it a talent?" "Yes," I said. "But then you have to work very hard. And you must have the passion as well," he said. "Yes," I said. "You must have the passion. You must have all three things, the talent, the hard work, and the passion. If you have only two, you won't do so well." "I think it's like that with everything," he said. "Yes," I said. "I think it is." "Good luck," he said. "Good luck to you too," I said. And now that I think of it, that's the other thing we all need. We need luck.